There's a problem in Australia that's been existent since forever, and yet whenever the national historians in this country talk about the pathway to, I guess, freedom, or the pathway to congressionalism for the native Aboriginal, the native Indigenous people, the Aboriginals in this country, from whatever standpoint, the historians talk about, they use a term called infanticide. INFANTICIDE, infanticide, like the word genocide. Things like that. It's the same thing, infanticide, where the historians talk about the Aboriginals were sort of popping off because they couldn't keep up with modern Australia or the settlement of Australia. Therefore, they became very disconnected and disheartened by the fact they couldn't communicate and couldn't be at their level. They sort of stood from a distance and just sort of self-destructed. We get the term infanticide, like the term infantry. But see, in this country, for as long as we can remember to even to this very day, we have the legal sex age at 16 years old. It's legal for people to have sex and have a baby at 16 years old. It's legal for them to have a car license and to operate a dangerous, lethal weapon like a car at the age of 17. And when they're 18 years old, they're given a license and a social temperance and a social, attitude and a social upbringing. The nation brings up our 18-year-olds legally to be able to drink, smoke, life and gamble and fuck their life away. So is that infanticide? Because when you're 18 years old, for example, you've only just acquired the legal right to drink, smoke, fuck, gamble and kill yourself and to give up on your life. Like anybody between the age of 16 and 25 having babies. They're not improving the workforce and bolstering and boosting, the strength of the workforce. So that is infanticide, isn't it? It's infanticide right across the country. And just trying to tailor history to the services in which today people don't understand, because like any language taught to them, 18-year-olds love to feel like they're indestructible. Any kid, any teenager are very impressionable. Teenagers are very encourageable. If you give them the right to drink beer, they'll drink at 10, or smoke, or fuck, or gamble, or anything. They want to drive cars when they're 8 years old. They want to drive cars when they're 12 years old. They want to ride their motorbikes on the street. They want to ride their go-karts on the street. They want to play with cherry bombs. They want to play with lighters. They want to start fires. So infanticide, in short, is like, well, if at 18 years old you've only just acquired the strength and the skills and the attributes to face the world head on, then it's like saying at 18 years old, with the way in which the country is raised and brought up, to smoke, drink, gamble and fuck its life away, then it's about as stupid as asking a brand new born infant baby to make its own decisions in life, because they're not part of the overall workforce bolstered and boosted. So therefore that term would be what's called infanticide. And just like consistent within the Aboriginal community, just like consistent within the Australian upbringing and the way of Australian life, they'll make an excuse like it's about boosting the economy numbers, or people able to, pay tax to the government, or people legal to operate within the framework of a monopolising economic outlook. That they'll call it fiscal policy, FISCAL, like a fiscal policy, in which helps boost and bolster the numbers of the economic managers, the government, or people in general. But then again, like that big word, the big phrase, no big picture is ever clear until all the little things in life are taken care of. So that's like what it is in federal parliament. That's what it is to be able to speak to people about the big picture and the overwhelming masses, or the majority, to be able to take action and change laws that helps readily identify the problems that occur as a result of our youth, our young people dying and failing to use and utilise their greater time, money, energy, resources, manpower, intelligence, and utilise their denomination, which is nothing more cost associated as far as liability than human life. Above all things, there's no greater liability than human life, but that's how they treat us. It's like the government's like on a massacre. They're massacring their people, the rich and the powerful, have massacred everything underneath them and failed to identify it as infanticide when in print, in absolute historical print and documentation, you wouldn't be a genius to figure it out. You know exactly that it's been infanticide, and therefore it's been infanticide ever since. Modern Australia, or Australia in general, like America, like Britain, these are the kinds of adopted policies that they've choose to raise our country. Like a rebellious free world that started from scratch. If you all started from scratch, then you need human guinea pigs. You need the numbers in order to make families rich, to make individual private investors and private enterprises rich, which means a hell of a lot of slaves and a hell of a lot of, ugly and poor people. Their life was over because it was called infanticide. That boosts the numbers as enough because it boosts the amount of attitude. And these 18-year-olds walking around saying they love their partner or that they're old enough to make their own choice. If you're a dog, like a pet, any pet needs a master, just like children need guardians and ministers, governors. But when we're legal, as soon as our mind, our human brain, as corruptible as the human brain is, as soon as we're 18 and we believe that, we're legal to make our own choices and stand on our 2 feet, we take a loss on that, we fall victim to infanticide, and we feel like we don't need anybody guiding us and instructing us. Like disciplinary measures that should be there, just like being able to enter a 2-year, military course to be super fit for an infantry. But if this country, like anything like not Israel or other ones, boot camps around the world, if this country isn't raising infantry level numbers, like the infantry, right, then what is it doing? That's right. It's extortion on the masses. It's moving through the population, like through every household. A one-size-fits-all legislation is like being blinded, is like blunting everybody's outlook, and it's taking away the proposition or the ability for any family or region or states to be able to, let's say, get powerful and get rich, because there's only so much power, there's only so much people, and there's only so much money from the beginning. So it lessens it's like breaks down the percentages. There's only so many percentages. Therefore, any family be trying to hold on like a clutch, and they're killing your children. They're killing all of our children just to be able to hold on to their precious whatever, their percentage that makes them at the top and everything else underneath it. Like a cup of water, oil and water don't mix. When you put oil and water in the same cup, the oil rises to the top. The gap between the rich and the poor. The rich are up there, fattening themselves up for the day of slaughter, and everything else underneath, even the little deposits of fat floating around the middle of the cup. You've got the upper middle class, the lower middle class, you've got the middle class, and anything, and then fattening themselves up for the day of slaughter is like, well, we need to purify the water cleaner. We need to purify the foundation of society. We need to purify the elements in which consistent, like the element of life. All life stems from life. That you can't derive or derivate or disassociate yourself from what life is. So when people dirty up the water, right, and just like our attitudes and just like our temperances, our faiths, right, and they drive us into a derivative outcome, they exhaust our rights and force us to go one way because, like the numbers, they try to control the masses because they can't control the numbers because there's only so many numbers. So what is infanticide? Infanticide. It's the law surrounding 16-year-olds be able to have kids and have sex, 17-year-olds legal to operate a lethal weapon, a car, and 18-year-olds being able to drink, smoke, and fucking life and gamble and just piss off into nowhere. So that, it's just kept within households. Strong families make strong households. Strong families make strong nations. Weak families make weak households. Weak families make weak nations. And society and families scream justice to these governments. If you had nothing to start with as a people, you can bet that you would be the most sophisticated sort of extortion racket on each other. whistling a tune to the whole world to come here. But when they get here, they get bogged down by the extortion. The extortion that takes you for a sick joke. Now we love our society, we love the world, we say we wouldn't give it up for nothing. And most people who are just lower middle class or even upper middle class, you know, like an ideal lifestyle, they say they wouldn't settle for less. But you know why that is, ladies and gentlemen? Because you're following each other and you're just too busy just somehow drifting off into a malign case of subliminal warfare. It's all subliminal warfare to get enough people to tick the boxes and nod their heads in some agreeable way in which, like you when you were 18 years old and like you when you were 17 to attain that car license, it's so ideal you couldn't give up on that. And supposedly you want your kids to do it. Supposedly you haven't resolved it yet as a minister to identify that a 16-year-old should never be knocked up and pregnant. Why are 16-year-olds legal to have sex? Well, like a extortionist world, a corrupt world, the laws and like the subliminal warfare, they've just toppled us and got into our heads thinking that it's okay to be pregnant at 16 and have sex, like predators that go after 16-year-olds. If you could make it 14 years old, you probably would make it 14. So I say that if 16-year-olds are allowed to have kids, and like the genetic predisposition in life, like generic predisposition, then you have to be able to put the ban on drugs and alcohol and gambling at 18 and shift it to 21 years old, because you need to give those 16-year-olds, at least if that's legal, the ability to, you know, get a grip with what they're doing. A female's body is like traumatic. It's trauma. Physical trauma. And it's very young and disconcerting for a female to be pregnant. It's a massive. It's like dying when you have a kid. It's the most painful, bloody experience a woman can ever friggin' have. But then you just say once they have the kids too, it's like, well, in the midst of all those 5 years between 16 and 21, or 9 years between 60 and 25, that's where infanticide exists, the term infanticide, and this is the great big picture that even ministers can't pick up on. When you say I do at a wedding, and anybody else in the church, you know, can use 10,000 words or more to object why these two people or these two syllables can't get together and live a life. Looks like extortion, like you haven't even thought it through. You just need some cover-up like a minister who pretends they're a minister to be able to confirm it. But when a marriage should be the greatest spectacle and the greatest stage you ever held. You and your partner getting married should have like 25,000 words or more. You should have 2 hours, 3 hours on stage, confessing each other's love and showing it like the greatest stage play both you and your partner ever, you know, showed your wider family and friends and community. Why that show? You know, because you need to be able to, I guess, register and give everybody a real rundown and a real explanation as to why your cousin should marry that person, or why your sister or auntie should marry that person, or why your brother and cousin should marry that girl. You don't know the family, but you need to get a fairer indication as to what these two people are. If you're just saying, I do, it's the greatest extortion racket in the history of mankind. It's the greatest fraudulent affair. Even worse, the prenuptial agreement. If you go ahead and sign that prenuptial agreement, you should be given 10 years jail instantly for forging documents. Otherwise, like the extortion and like the advance on people and families, that's where this one-size-fits-all policy and the vows and everything that people just sort of subliminally accept, as a minister, as a people, you don't even know what you're doing. You think that's holistic, consecrated, reserved for special use. No. What is holistic? What is holistic? What is consecrated? Right? A stage account. A trustworthy account of articulated history. You don't just travel 1,000 kilometres to a wedding and hear someone say, I do, and watch them get drunk and dance and have a meal. That doesn't confirm anything to the family. That's why the families are always hearing the bad news, and how these marriages and partnerships end up in divorce within the first 3 to 5 years. So if that's not any indication as to the failed intuition of our young people, which we should actually be learning about that at school. They don't even teach it in Catholic private school. You know, they're too busy to get Catholic private school giving us sexual education, or getting us to stick our little finger in a lamb's heart aorta. The aorta of a lamb's heart. So, or telling us that, you know, sperm is like a quarter of a teaspoon to a young child if they ejaculate. I don't know why they tell us that. But sometimes when you blow, it seems like you're icing an entire cake. But if that relates to a child at school, then go figure where all this malign interest, like, well, why they're teaching kids such things. Because like the church, and it governs the practice, it just secretly does a backdoor job on every family in the world. It secretly takes you into a backdoor like a trapdoor spider, and helps society rot in hell for that which, like ministerialship and governing practices, fails to pick up on because of the overwhelming infanticide like genocide that has been cast on the masses from the very beginning.